Welcome. Thanks for joining us. I'm Susan Noyes, the founder of Make It Better Media Group, which includes Better, Marin, Spaces, and the Make It Better Foundation. And I am delighted to have David Handler, one of the nationally renowned trust and estate attorney with Kirkland Ellis, here today to speak with us about preserving wealth and family values. Reality collides with conventional wisdom. David joined us for a virtual event last year, and it was very engaging. We're delighted to have him back again, and I'm particularly excited about this talk because it really relates to the things that parents care about most. You know, the values and keeping the family together, and how the realities can collide with that. So David is, as I mentioned, trust and estates attorney with Kirkland Ellis. He's also a married father of 3 adult children, and lives in Northbrook, Illinois. But his practice is across the country. Welcome, David.
Thanks for having me again. Apologies ahead of time. My camera's up here and my notes are down here, so if you see me looking up and down. But I've been doing this, meaning estate planning for families, individuals, for 30 years now. And picked up a few things along the way. Most of the time, the practice is very focused on tax planning, estate and gift tax avoidance, charitable planning. And in my view, a lot of times things are given short shrift as far as focus on what's the ultimate goal, what's the objective here besides avoiding taxes. So I'm going to be talking about what I'll call the softer side of some of this planning. And as the title suggests, I'm going to be saying things that are somewhat against conventional wisdom. So I'm not totally against the things I'm going to be talking about, but I'm hopefully going to give you a lot of food for thought as far as whether these a lot of concepts and a lot of estate plans make sense and what you're trying to accomplish. One thing I just want to kick it off with very briefly is the estate tax for just a couple minutes. And my point here is, were it not for the estate tax, there would be far fewer people that actually have estate plans. According to LexisNexis, which keeps tabs on these things, about 55 American adults don't have a will or estate plan in place. I've heard higher numbers. And if you go to minorities, the numbers are as high as 75%. I used to be shocked at who would walk in the door with the amount of wealth and number of children and grandchildren and on their second spouse and never did a will. I used to be shocked. I'm not anymore because it happens so often. But my point is, the estate tax is what gets them in the door. They're urged by their accountant, by their financial advisor, maybe by their children, or just from reading things on their own, that they should get an estate plan in place. There's this estate tax. You need to avoid it. You need to plan for it. And were it not for that, a lot more people would die without a will. And I can tell you firsthand, we've handled estates with that situation. It's a mess. First, in most states, if there's a surviving spouse and children, or in many states, I should say at least, half the assets go to the spouse and half go to the children outright. One, that'll be a surprise to the spouse, meaning I'm only getting half. Second, it could trigger a lot of estate tax. Third, that means the kids get the assets outright. Fourth, you need a court-appointed guardian if they're minors. It's a big mess, and it's really difficult for all parties involved. So, like I said, if it weren't for the estate tax, there wouldn't be estate plans in many cases. And second, I think families, children would be inheriting assets later because of the estate tax planning. My clients transfer wealth during their lifetimes. If there's no estate tax, there's no gift tax, I'm guessing most of them would say, why should I give it away? It's mine. They'll get it when I'm gone. And they would hold on to more of it, which means in most cases, they, especially, wealthier families have better health care in general. And so they live to age 80, 90, 100. And that means their kids inherit assets when they're 50, 60, 70. They could have used it a little earlier than that. So my clients' children are usually happy that they're coming in to see me as well. But that's sort of the first point I want to get across as far as estate plans not being done and the estate tax being an impetus to wealth transfers and to doing this planning in the first place. Susan, I don't know if you have any thoughts or comments on that, or I'll jump into the next section. And by the way, if anyone has any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat box, and we will be addressing those later as well. So feel free to do so.
Thank you for that reminder, David. I should have given it earlier. Could you just give one quick example of technique used by your clients and that should be used by parents of adult children who want to transfer wealth earlier and avoid estate tax?
Well, two really simple examples are the annual exclusion. So each person can give away, it's actually $16,000 this year. It was up from 15. You can give away $16,000 a year to as many people as you want. So 16 to each of your kids, grandkids, their spouses, your neighbors, friends, nieces, nephews, whoever you want to benefit. Obviously, that means a married couple can give $32,000 to as many people as they want each year. And those add up. It's a freebie. It's like putting money away in a 401k. You get the deduction or you don't. You used it or you didn't. And then just using your lifetime exemption. So currently there's an estate and gift tax exemption of roughly $12 million, which means neither of those taxes apply until you've transferred more than that amount to people other than charity or spouse. And giving away $1 million today is worth more than giving $1 million in 40 years, because that $1 million goes to your kids or in a trust for their benefit, gets invested. 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8. And so that $1 million gift turned into an $8 million wealth transfer by doing it today versus waiting for the future.
And that can be in addition to the 16 or 32,000 a year that you give away. So that's
absolutely.
The 12 million on top of year by year by year. Thank you so much. Perfect example.
That's right. So let's talk about passing along a family business. Whenever I have a client come in, if they have a closely held business, maybe it's their first generation, maybe it's second generation, an important element of the estate plan is, what do we do with this? How do we pass it along to the next generation? And I ask the question before we try to figure out how to pass it along, the question of, should we pass it along to the next generation? Is it a good idea to transfer the business to the children, to the grandchildren, whoever it might be? So one fact to note, about 40% of U.S. family-owned businesses survive to a second generation. So 60% don't. Of those, only 13% survive to the third generation. Doesn't mean that they went out of business. It just means they may have been sold. Maybe they did go under. Maybe they went public. And it goes from there, but didn't stay a family business past there. So the odds are low of it getting that far. But you first have to ask the question, is this the best asset to transfer to the kids? The issue is times change. What was a great business 10, 20, 30 years ago may not be 10, 20, or 30 years from now. The number of businesses that have been eliminated by Amazon, by the iPhone, by Walmart. I mean, you can just think of all the mom and pop shops, the mom and pop businesses. When I said the iPhone, I mean, let's see, U.S. mail, phone business, newspapers, banking, all these things, music, all these things are now on iPhone apps, birthday cards, invitations. Just imagine how those businesses have all been disrupted. And if that was your family business, vastly impacted by any of these companies. So it might take some reinventing. Kodak is gone. And if you went back 25 years ago, no one would have thought, maybe it's more than 25, that Kodak would ever be gone from anywhere. Fujifilm, on the other hand, has survived, but it's because it's not a film company anymore. They completely transformed into healthcare diagnostics and LCD panels and pharmaceuticals. So, like I said, what was a good business 10, 20 years ago may not be a good business going forward. And so passing that business on to the family versus perhaps selling it and diversifying. There's also the issue of ability of the family to continue running it. So just because your children have your name, it doesn't mean that they're well suited. Susan, you had a comment for this?
I do. I would love it if you would give us a very specific example of a family that you have worked with who didn't do the right thing, but don't violate any confidentialities, just for our audience to think about.
Well, I have seen, I've seen companies go under. There was a client with a trash collection business, and they were doing great. And then they weren't, because a big company came into town and took over and pushed them aside, and it was a very different situation. Or another one is, and actually, that same family had another business, and right now they're struggling because the father who started everything passed away years ago, and there's 5 children. 2 are active in the business, 3 are not. So you can imagine the discord. They want to reinvest, they want to grow the business. We'd like to sell, we'd like distributions. It's that tension that was never intended to be there, but it's just naturally there because they're sharing an asset.
So your recommendation in that scenario, you touched on it. It was sell or others. Could you spell that out briefly?
Yeah, it might be the answer is sell, plan to diversify, to take down the risk of the family. Everyone can go their own way, start their own businesses or grow their own businesses, or just allocate different assets to different children. Fine, you will get the businesses, but I'll take care of my other kids in other ways with the homes and the cash and life insurance or whatever it is. But having them together is what's causing this stress. And actually, the family I'm talking about, we've been negotiating a buyout of the 3 from the 2 for about 3 years now. It's about to happen, but it's taken a long time, a lot of discussion, a lot of difficulty getting there.
Thank you so much.
So, but even if you decide, yeah, let's pass this down, like I said, just because they have your last name, it doesn't mean they're good at running the same kind of business. First, they were not raised in the same household. They weren't raised in the same times. They don't have the same anything. I mean, I just think of my own kids. They're raised in the same house, and they're so completely different. So just imagine generation to generation, how different, just so very, very different. So it doesn't mean that they necessarily have the skills. Doesn't mean that they're not skilled. They could be excellent at running other businesses, or being a lawyer or a doctor, or any other field, or just a different type of business, something that they're more interested in. And so that's another issue of, hey, we're going to pass it down to my sons and daughters, and they don't have the ability necessarily, or the skill set, or the same drive, the same motivations, or the same passion about the business that you had as the founder. And then I know, we have clients that, oh, look at Japan. They have businesses. They go to multiple generations. But the fact is, they're not family businesses. They adopt the CEO. So if I was the founder of the company and my daughter married someone and I don't think he's fit to run the business, meanwhile, there's this other person who's my new CEO and he's outstanding. It is very common in Japan for the business owner to adopt that person as their child. And so suddenly it's a family-run business again. So don't be deluded by things in Japan. In Germany has the second oldest family businesses. Most of those are breweries, which anyone can be happy running a brewery. So one of my points is, don't require retention of the family business, and really think about, before you start planning to pass it down, should it be passed down in the first place, based on goals, based on skills, based on risk of having what is in effect a single stock holding. One thing I just touched on before is fairness. When Susan and I were talking, and that is it fair to all the children? So some are working in the business, some are not. How do we equalize? Is it really equal? You never know what the business is going to be worth when one passes away. So how do you make it equal? But then you have the issue, if there's some in the business, some not. There's strain over distributions, reinvestment, compensation. Hey, why are you paying yourself so much? I'm not getting anything. Yeah, but you don't work here. And all these things are stress points of co-owners.
So David, 2 great questions have come in. One I'd really like for you to think about, comment on. Someone said, the lazy kids want the money from the competent ones. Yeah, I think that's a perfect example of what you're describing.
Yeah, and so I want to dispel that, just to jump on that one. Just because they're not working in the family business doesn't mean they're lazy. They might be working twice as hard at whatever job they're doing that is their skill set, is their passion. And you wouldn't want them in the family business. That's not their skill set. That's not their ability. That's not their interest. And if you have any interest in your kid's happiness, you don't want to put them in a job that they hate. And so they're not, I'm not calling them the lazy children. They're the ones just aren't in the business. But it is an issue because, okay, but we're running the business. Why do you profit from us? Well, mom and dad left us all of the stock. There you have the discord. There you have, and by the way, the other thing is it may not be laziness. It may be disability of a child. They need to care for someone at home. I mean, there's 1,000 things in the world that go wrong. I wake up every day amazed that my life is still on course. There's so many things that can derail things, like a war or a pandemic or anything else.
So I'm going to have you jump ahead because I think this is such an important topic. There is kind of a preamble that you suggest to some of your clients that they adopt that makes it clear that they're going to treat their children equally and with values that most parents would agree on, whether or not it's you're going to work in the family business. Could you just run through that for everybody quickly, please?
Well, I often will put in trust agreements, or sometimes it's in a side letter. It's the same thing at the end of the day. A statement of guidance to the trustees. And it's really like a note to the family for when I'm gone of these are things that we value. So not necessarily trying to dictate too many things. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But just give high level. We value and encourage education and being productive and handling money intelligently and be law abiding and having healthy relationships and a healthy lifestyle. But then it goes on to say, these are not tests and requirements. There's 1,000 things that happen to people, and you need to take into account their situation, their circumstances, their skills, their families, their geographical areas, all of those things, and their abilities, and sort of serving as guidance to the trustees, whoever's managing these assets and perhaps making distribution decisions of, okay, now we know what the values are. How do we get there? Can we get there through distributions from the trust, holding, paying for certain things, not paying for certain things, as opposed to mandating rules. So let's talk about the rules issue, which you and I have talked about in the past. I have great concerns when trust agreements put in too many rules. You must go to college. If you get married, you get this. If you earn $1, we'll give you $1.50 from the trust. First, trying to control your children through a trust document. If you couldn't raise them and teach them and educate them in the 25 years you had them at home, the trust document in the latter 50 years is not going to fix it. That's why I go back to this concept of guidance and values that we still like to encourage, but putting in requirements that you must do this, must do that, must marry someone of a certain faith. Well, know what they'll do? They won't get married. We'll just live together. How's that? Or they'll say, keep your money. Fine, I'm caught out. And I've had not many clients. I've had a couple clients that have had trust like that. And they said, well, I didn't really mean that. I don't really want to cut them out. I just really want them to marry someone of the same faith or whatever it is I'm trying to encourage. Now, suddenly the trust cut them out. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong.
And then that child can cut the parent out of their life, right?
Absolutely. So, yeah, which goes to the point of, money does not bring families together. Families bring families together. Money can be a thing that helps families grow, have a safety net, live a better life, pursue their passions. But if you control too much, and you must do this, you must work in the business, you do A, B, and C, some will follow it, but they're probably not following it because you said so. They're following it because they were taught that, and that's what they want to do with their lives. And if they are following it because you said so, they may not be happy. And that's the worst outcome of all. They'll have lots of money and unhappiness. And
So two more great comments. Someone
yeah.
said Charles Barkley recently reminded his kids, I am rich. We are not rich.
Yes,
Your
I saw
response
that.
to that?
I think it's great. I'm always careful, and I tell clients, don't hold money as the big stick. It's just not the best way to control people. And I'll pay for this if you do this, and I won't if you don't. I mean, I'm not saying it's not used at all, and it is, but it is good to let people, your children in particular, know, yeah, we have money. Um, we can help you. You know, set the expectations is what I tell my clients. Set expectations with your kids. Do we have 10 million? Do we have 100 million? Do we have $1 billion? That doesn't matter. That's ours. We can choose to do what we want with it. We can leave it all to charity. We can cut you out of the will, whatever it may be. I'm not saying this as a threat, but this is our money. We want you to make your way. And that's the perfect opportunity to have the discussion. What are the hopes and expectations? And I think it's not just expectations, it is hopes too, because they need to find their own way. But so the hopes and expectations are you will get an education. You'll find a passion. You'll find a career. Maybe it'll be a social worker making $40,000 a year. If you do that, we're happy. And if you, and we'll help you, supplant your life, and you can live in a better neighborhood than you could otherwise pay for. What are those expectations? That might not be. I've had some clients where, no, they should make their own way, and that's that. And I try to convince them otherwise of all the reasons you want to, at minimum, have a safety net for your kids.
Well, we need all the great social workers in the country we can get.
Absolutely.
The need is greater than ever. Do you have a particular age or stage of life when you think that parents should start speaking about wealth with their children?
Yeah, I think probably shortly after college, 23, 25, 28, call it the mid 20s. First of all, it's no secret to your kids, if you have money, that they know that. Usually they don't know the full extent. You can live in a very nice neighborhood. You can have nice cars, take nice vacations. Does that mean you're worth 5 million? Does that mean you're worth 100 million? One couldn't tell. On the other hand, with Google now, they might be able to Google what your pay is, or that you sold a huge amount of stock. It sold your company for a huge. So it's out there. Most of the information is out there, and so it's not a secret. And so that goes back to setting them on the right course, and it may be even earlier than that, because hey, while you're in college, and it depends on the message you want to convey. The message might be, you got to make your own way. So if you think you want to live in this neighborhood and you got to be a banker to do that, then choose that path. Or is the message, we're here to help you out. We'd like you to do something productive with your life. Whether or not it makes a lot of money, we can help you still live a comfortable life. And I've got clients, there's 100 different variations on all of that. But that's a hard thing to figure out. What is the message? What is it that you want your kids to get from this money or not? I have one client, and years ago, he has 5 daughters, 3 are triplets. So they're all close in age. And before he had any kids, he was very sure of what he wanted. He was in his 30s when he did his estate plan. And his estate plan said, between, I'll pay for everything up to age 22, get them through school. From age 22 to 40, you wanted no distributions. Make your own way, find your own way. After age 40, you are who you are, and now you can get distributions from the trust. And I convinced him to loosen that. I said, I guarantee one day you'll have 5 daughters looking up at you, and they're going to want to try to start a business or live in a building that has a doorman for safety reasons or whatever, all these other things. And you're going to want to help them out a bit. And even though their age is 22 to 40, don't foreclose, or the child who cannot work for some, terrible reason. So you got to always plan for the unknown.
David, there's a great question. Uh, Someone asked why 20s and not earlier? Not
Um,
teens, not it's.
Earlier might be better. I think by the 20s is probably what I should have said. Um, Earlier, it's tough. How much earlier? I think perhaps starting college might be ideal. Before then, if you tell your kids that are 14 years old that you have $1 million, you might as well have just told them you have $1 billion. There's no differentiation. $1 million seems absolutely endless. Of how could you possibly spend that? I do have one client. He's probably in his 60s now. He told me he got the trust distribution when he was 21, and he went and bought a Ferrari. It's the typical story, but he's the only one I've ever actually heard did it. And then he got the bill for the insurance of a 21-year-old driving a Ferrari, and he sold it.
That's a good
It
lesson.
seemed like he had endless money until he didn't. So that's my concern with too young. Just look, be a kid, go through high school, enjoy life. And, as you get to your later teens and then early 20s, I think is the best time to educate.
I feel like teens is all about social and emotional development, and it's finding your own
Right.
authentic self. And it doesn't need to have that extra layer of, oh, he's the rich kid.
Absolutely. It's just
Um,
one more layer in there.
One other great question. In Marin County, people live particularly long. It's a very healthy lifestyle, and it is a wealthy community. And
Yes.
there's a comment that longevity needs to actually be considered for surviving partners. So could you particularly, it's one, maybe the one with the real wealth dies earlier. What should be set up?
Oh, absolutely. Leaving enough for surviving spouse or surviving partner or whoever it is. I always ask my clients, there's the obvious, oh, you want to leave assets to your spouse and then to your kids? Yes. And then I ask, is there anyone else that you provide for, that you care for? Are your parents reliant on you? Oh, yeah, I own the condo that they live in. Oh, no, yeah, I give them $5,000 a month. Oh, and there's my nephew with, a disability, and we're helping out his family. Whatever it is, when you're gone, it ends. You got to provide for it. And so that includes the surviving partner or spouse, and making sure that they have enough, not just dollars. You can have a whole pile of assets, but there's no liquidity. There you go back. That's another example of the family business. So I started the business, I'm gone. I leave it to a trust for my wife, which one can defer estate tax, and two, because I wanted to have the assets. My son and daughter are running the business. My wife wants cash flow. They're trying to grow the business. So even tension there. It's not even just tension among siblings. It can be a tension with the parent. And that's if it's even their mother. Maybe it's a second marriage, and even more tension. So absolutely, this longevity, you got to plan to age 105 these days, and not only plan for that, but plan for huge changes in values of assets. What you thought was, I've had clients say, I'm going to leave each of my kids $5 million. And then I ask them, so the goal is 5 million, if the day you die and the market crashes and the 5 is down to 3. So, I mean, not that it can't recover, but just think about the amount, and did you leave enough? And by the way, now there's pills out there that are miraculous that cost $100,000 per pill. I know the hepatitis C, I think, pill is like $80,000, for the cure. You would want your children and grandchildren to be able to benefit from that, and suddenly would consume a large portion of the assets.
Yeah, hopefully they have better insurance in that. But if not, there's a question that particularly tickles my heart. Can you talk about philanthropy as an expression of personal and family values, and how that translates practically into estate planning?
Yeah, I think the philanthropy says a lot to the children. Obviously, people aren't going to do it just for the message. They're philanthropic. That's why they're giving away money. But I always make a point of conveying to my kids what we give away and who we give it to. Because I want them to see that this is an important thing. And, it's giving something of yourself and there's a little bit of, there should always be a little bit of pain. Like, I'm not going to have this $1,000 that I could have bought something else with. I'm giving it to someone else. So I now that they're in their 20s, I involve them, pick some charities. Who do you think we as a family should support, even if it's not necessarily coming from them yet? And so I think it's an important part because it conveys values. I think it sets in motion a lifetime of giving. And I have seen it bring people together around a family foundation. They manage it together. I have one client, both the parents are long gone. There's 5 kids spread across the country. They're managing a $35 million foundation. And a couple times a year at a minimum, they're getting together. I'm sure they do other times, but for the foundation, hey, we need to give out, a couple $1 million every year. Who are we going to support? What do you think? Everyone brings their causes together, and then obviously they catch up with each other and about their kids in that process. So it can be a really uniting thing, a beneficial thing. And the other thing I point out to my clients, because I always ask, even if they don't say it, do you want to leave anything to charity? Not my place to say you have to. It's your choice. But think about this. If I have an estate that's large enough where there's estate tax, and I've got 3 kids, I can leave $1 million, one more million to my kids. And after estate tax, let's just call it $500,000 divided by 3. It's $166,000 a piece. So they can each get an extra $166,000, or we can leave $1 million estate tax free to a charity. I mean, huge impact. Is the 166 going to make a difference? At some point, maybe not. And so I try to get my clients to look at it that way of diminishing benefit versus enormous benefit to charity.
I love that example. I also like you touched on conveying your values. So when you're getting together as a family and to talk about philanthropy, as you do with your children, everyone gets to express their values behind the gifts that they would like to make. Have you ever, and I've heard over and over again that a family foundation really does a good job of keeping multiple generations of a family together. Have you ever seen times when that wasn't the case and when having a family foundation ended up being a problem?
I have had some foundations split up. It's usually more at the next generation down. Because if you think about siblings, they grew up in the same house, they took vacations together, they fought, they played, they did everything, and they're forever siblings. When you go down the next generation, it's first cousins, and they lived in separate homes, maybe different states and cities, maybe saw each other, twice a year. It just depends on circumstances. And so when it gets down to that generation, it's harder, and there's more people. So now it's not 3 people, it's 9. And coming from different backgrounds, different circumstances, different views. We're conservative, we're liberal, we're this, we're that. And so I have had some situations where peacefully, let's divide it. Here's your piece to give to charity. Here's our piece. Sometimes they roll them into a donor advised fund. But I haven't seen any where there's been actual acrimony and they're not speaking.
Well, that's good news in my mind.
Yeah.
That's another reason to
Absolutely
put that into your estate plan. There are really great questions coming in now, so I'm going to move a little faster.
Sure.
Someone said that they are familiar with Core Ventures as a resource for helping young adult children find their meaningful life path. What other resources do you recommend to encourage adult children to thrive and flourish as inheritors?
So I don't have any companies or firms I can point you to here. I know there are some, I don't know how they do, somewhat like family psychologist, wealth advisor people that help families determine what is our goal, what are our goals, what are we trying to accomplish, how do we balance these different competing interests. But as far as encouraging children to thrive and flourish. So I'm sorry, like I said, I don't have any firm, but I think there are some of the major banks, they have programs for, I say children, but they're probably in their 20s or so at that point, where they talk about they're really somewhat classes. Sometimes it's classes on financial instruments and money and what is all this stuff. And others are, what does it mean to have this kind of wealth? What does it mean to you? What can you do? But those are very difficult because everyone sending their kids to those have different views, very different views on what they would like their kids to hear. So really the best is from you. And that's why the messaging is difficult.
For sure, we want our kids to learn our values first. I actually think this would be a great topic for follow-up articles on Better, and we'll circle back to you and see if we can't find good resources to publish and share. There are more good questions. Someone said, we are living longer. Should I have long-term coverage or just pay for it if I end up with health concerns? This is addressing that $80,000 a pill issue that you raised earlier.
Right. Well, we're also seeing more people buy long-term health or, like nursing home coverage. And it's not necessarily a nursing home. It could be at-home healthcare as well. So, and the costs of those things are high. And as it goes higher, we're seeing more limitations in those policies. We'll only pay for this and not that. But it can be wealth depleting. If you need at-home care for 15 years, 24/7 and equipment and whatnot, it's expensive, let alone in a nursing home when at-home is not feasible anymore. So, and by the way, there are life insurance policies that now have that feature where, okay, you've got this $5 million policy, but it can be tapped into for nursing and home health care during your lifetime, and they'll just reduce the death benefit when you're gone. So I think that's a great combination, and perhaps a less expensive way to pay for it. But it is worth exploring those things.
So that could also be a good follow-up. Like, let's find references. There have to be online resources that people can go to sort of estimate what their main needs might be, and examples.
But one thing to keep in mind, my first year at U of I, at University of Illinois, in the business school, you had to take a class on insurance. And the dean of the business school actually taught the class. And the very first thing he taught us was insurance is for things you can't afford. Mm-hmm. So you shouldn't buy, if you have more than enough resources to easily pay these expenses, buying insurance to pay for it is not going to be cost efficient. You should probably just pay for it yourself, because obviously there's a profit built in for the insurance company. The insurance is for, hey, I'm going to cover myself because I might not be able to afford this, or I don't want it to completely deplete my assets and not leave something to my children. But if it's something you can afford, just like when you set your deductible for your car, if you could afford $1,000 accident, it's not going to bankrupt you, then have $1,000 deductible. Don't pay for the lower $100 deductible.
So along the lines of healthcare, there's a question: how do you give people more than $16,000 without it being income? And I'm having in mind that we can pay for education and healthcare and other things, but I'd like for you to interpret this question and answer it any way you want.
Yeah. So the two enormous exceptions to gift tax, where it's not an annual exclusion gift, it doesn't use the $12 million exemption, is payment of someone's medical expenses or tuition. So if someone has large, small, medium medical expenses, whether it's doctors, hospital, medications, nursing, you can pay for those unlimited, not a gift. The main key is you have to pay, don't have them pay for it and you pay them back. That's a gift. You have them give you the bill and you pay the bill directly, or give them a credit card and they put it on your card. And same thing with tuition. You can pay for your friends, nieces, nephews, children's tuition, again, to the school directly, not reimbursing them. And it doesn't matter how much it is, it doesn't count as a gift. And really, those are probably the two largest expenses people face in a lifetime, besides buying a home.
Well, and then speaking of buying a home, isn't that another way that parents can sort of help gift money because they provide favorable mortgage rates?
Yes, we have many clients that do that for their children. Maybe they've already set up some trusts and so forth, and those are invested doing their own thing. But you can be the lender to your children. It's got to be a real loan. They have to pay you. Otherwise, it's not a loan, it's a gift. But the IRS puts out interest rates each month, sort of the minimum rate you need to charge, and you can lock in that rate. So right now, I could lend my daughters, money to buy a house at about 2% interest right now. And I heard on the radio this morning, average mortgage rates are getting up to 4%. So it's half the rate coming from me. I'm probably not going to do the entire credit check and all of that either. But it does need to be documented with a note. They should pay annually, make it a real loan.
So there's a great question. Can you pay people's student loans and have that credit too?
No, unfortunately, that's something they should look at changing. But no, tuition has to be paid to the institution. It doesn't repaying someone's debt, even if it was for education, doesn't count.
So, David, you have takeaway points that I think are truly outstanding. And I want to make sure you have a chance to deliver all of them. So I encourage everyone just to grab a pen and paper if you can. Know that we will also summarize this in our follow-up articles. And to answer someone's question, yes, this video will be online in our YouTube channel and tied to articles that sort of deliver the expertise too. And we will, for everyone who has signed up for today's session, we will send this video out tomorrow as a follow-up. But David, please give us your top line best advice.
Yeah. So one is divide things up. I've had clients say, I want to have this one big trust, and my kids and grandkids and great grandkids will all share from it, and they'll all be happy. And I said to him, so you think there's going to be a giant table of 75 people all singing Kumbaya together who are fourth cousins, sharing the same investments, competing for dollars, criticizing who's spending how much? It's just set up for disaster. So divide assets, let your kids go their own way, divide trusts, don't force them to share. Sharing toys is one thing when you're 8, sharing a bank account when you're 40 is not good. 2, the function of trusts is not to educate your kids when you failed to do so. It's to manage, protect, and ultimately dole out assets. Trustees are not parents. They're not parole officers. They're not social workers. They're not teachers. They're not priests and rabbis. So don't try to make them that when you're designing trusts. Just keep in mind what they can and what they cannot accomplish. And also have objectives that can be achieved. So safety net, ensure a standard of living, enable beneficiaries to pursue their passion, enhancing lifestyle, whatever it is, whichever you or your clients fall under. Just make sure that those are objectives that can be achieved through a trust, through some trustee. And then, as we talked about before, I like the idea of setting forth principles of values. Whatever those may be. I have a set, it's in the materials. My clients always review them, modify them as they see fit. But more importantly than anything else is convey those values to your kids while you're here and have those conversations. Because that's the best way to convey it and live them. You can't say to do this and then live a very different life. Everyone will see what reality is. So Susan, anything to add from that?
Can you give an example, again, without violating any confidentiality, of a family who put those, modified that document explaining values, and you watched the surviving family members kind of thrive under them?
Yeah, I don't want to claim credit for them thriving because of my clause in the trust, I still give the credit to the parents and how they were raised. And by the way, I also don't want to take anything away from any parents, because you do your best, you try, but your kids did not grow up solely under your watch and in your house. And there's lots of external influences, and people turn out differently than you may have hoped or dreamed. It may or not be bad, it just may be different. So I don't want to put too much pressure on people. Hey, you've got to raise them, and if they didn't come out the way you wanted, it's your fault. It's a crazy world, and people are a product of 1,000 different factors. But I have seen people thrive from under, with these trusts and do well. They've been an enabler, and I've heard clients be concerned about trust being a disabler. Oh, they'll have all this money, they'll do nothing. Again, how did you teach them? How did you set their expectations? How did you set their values? If you let them do nothing and blow off school and goof off and you paid for their apartment, well, yeah, that's how they turned out. You did that. If you didn't, and you said, we expect you to go to school and do your best, and if you can get good grades, even better, and find a great job and do these things, and that's when they do flourish. And these guidelines have been helpful to their trustees when something comes up, so they have something to point to. So, look, this is what your parents wanted. Because a lot of trusts just say things like distributions for medical care and education and support. Medical and education, we all know what that is, but support or support in your custom manner of living, what does that mean? It means 1,000 things to 1,000 people. But hey, here's something your parents said, being a law-abiding citizen is something we value. And we hear that you're ending up, doing a night in jail every weekend. That's we're not going to subsidize that lifestyle. So we'll help you get off of it. We'll help you go another route. But I can report that the vast majority of my clients have normal, healthy, thriving children and grandchildren. And that's just a credit to how they were raised. And it wasn't the money that did it or didn't.
Is it possible to sort of disinherit somebody with that clause that you see it in movies? Anybody who contests, the will and the trust that we've set up will be disinherited. Is that a
Right.
real thing? Does it work?
It is. It's called a no contest clause. And it's really, usually the main goal is, if you're not leaving everything equally, if it's all equally, then who's going to contest it? And so, but if you say, Johnny is going to get $10, everyone else is going to get 20 million, Johnny might contest it. Well, I guess he has nothing to lose in that example. Fine. You don't get your $10. But if it's unequal, that's often where they're used, because you're concerned that someone's going to say, hey, that's not what they wanted. They were under undue influence. You convinced them to do this. No, if you challenge this, you're going to lose it all. So before you go that path, something is better than nothing. So they are used that way. Sometimes with the second marriage, similar situations. Did you really want to leave it to your second spouse? Yes, I did. And if you challenge it, you're not going to inherit anything on the back end. So they do exist.
Okay. And then
Can be.
talk about the rule against perpetuity.
So this is something every first-year law student learns, and they forget it within 15 minutes of the final. But the rule against perpetuities is basically a rule that developed under case law over hundreds of years that says you can't have a trust last forever, because David and Susan put trusts in place for the kids back in 2022, and now we're in the year 2122, and they don't know anything about what the world looks like. If we're, are we living on Mars anyway? And does there something called college exist, or, all these things. And so it's sort of the concept of dead hand control shouldn't continue for too long. And so a trust has to end within roughly, under this rule, call it about 100 years. And so at that point in time, doesn't matter what rules you wrote, it's over. Now, there's a handful of states, several states actually, I should say, that allow you to have perpetual trust. They eliminate the rule against perpetuities. Colorado said 1,000 years is the limit. Where they came up with that, where Florida has 360 years. Again, by the time you get to 360 years, the money has dissipated anyway among 17 generations. So, but you can have perpetual trusts, so they can go down more than just say 100 years. But that's the concept behind it. Of okay, you might have been smart, but you're not as smart as you think to control something for 200 years.
Great. One last question for you. What else do you want us to know?
Each estate plan is individual for you, for your assets, for your wealth, for your children, for your objectives. There's no, I mean, I want to say there's no two that are alike. There's a lot of them that are alike. A lot of people have the same views and objectives and situations. But don't be swayed by what you hear other people do or read about as, oh, this person did it. Their kids seem great, so I'll do that. Their kids are not yours. Brought up in a different place, different manner. And by the way, you never really know what anyone's like until you live with them or they're your own. So don't be swayed by that. You need to just devise your own plan, but make sure you have one. Like I said at the beginning, the majority of this country does not have an estate plan in place. Even a bare bones will that says I leave everything to my spouse and then equally to my kids, if that's what you want to do, is better than nothing. So those are my parting thoughts.
I think that it's difficult for people to think about dying. And that's probably one of the reasons that they procrastinate that. Do you have any advice on how to get, to move beyond that? How to have conversations that allow you to, think about this more objectively?
Right. I mean, I know I rank just below the dentist and insurance salesman or somewhere in that range as far as things that people want to talk about. I try to express it as it's really lifetime planning. We do powers of attorney for healthcare and property. If you become incapacitated for whatever reason, for a short time or a long period of time, these are people that can make decisions and handle things for you. This is lifetime planning. If you want to pass on your family business, you need to talk about it now and figure it out now. Or if you want to benefit your children when they're in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, not 50s, 60s, and 70s, this is lifetime planning. How do we want to do it? Annual gifts, setting up a big trust, other complex strategies. If we want to give to charity during our lifetime, I see clients that say, oh, and when we're gone, we're going to leave $5 million to charity. I say, well, if you can afford it, do it today. You get to see the benefit. It's just some random date in the future that charity is going to get a big check. Why don't you do it now if you can? You get an income tax deduction, and you get to see the benefits. You see how the charity uses the money and benefits from that.
The impact that you have on other people's lives. How good does that feel?
Right.
There's a great question. My parents died having not named my deceased brother in their wills and trusts. So the person who wrote this had a brother who died, but now his wife is upset that their children will not inherit anything. What can be done to address the situation?
Well, first, often a will say, I leave my assets to my children per stirpes, which is a term that means if one of my children is not living, then their share goes to their kids. So any will or trust, the vast majority would be written that way. Because most people don't say, well, my kids who are living should get it. And if they happen to predecease me, too bad for the grandkids. In fact, they usually like the grandkids better. But if you have the situation where it truly is, it went to two of the three, and I've had that situation. I've had basically the kids get together if they're willing, say, okay, we inherited all these assets. Some of this would have gone to our nieces and nephews. Do we want to do something about it? We can use some of the money to pay for their tuition. We can make annual exclusion gifts. We can use some of our lifetime gift exemption to rectify what the will did not do. But it does take generosity on their part.
Yeah, that's from the kindness of their heart. That's not a legal challenge.
Right. I mean, people challenge the will saying that's not what they intended. Those are hard to prove, especially since the person who supposedly intended it is no longer there to testify. And this is their will, and it says they were of sound mind, and it was witnessed and everything else. So those are uphill battles.
David, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so very much. And for everyone who wants to continue to ask questions, we will be moving to private tables. So you could ask, David will be at a table and can answer additional questions. I will be at a table that is all about how to talk to your children about family values and wealth. And the executive director of the Make It Better Foundation, Sharon Crone, will be at a table to address how the foundation and Make It Better Media Group can help you raise more money. David, I hope you do this again. You're just terrific. We will follow up with some of those good articles and resources. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.